Welcome to the Prospective Doctor Podcast, brought to you by Med School Coach. Pre-med and medical students alike are encouraged to tune in each week for tips on how to become a strong med school candidate, gain acceptance into the school of your dreams, and succeed on your journey toward residency and becoming a doctor.
Hello, everybody. I'm super excited, and we have a wonderful guest today, Dr. Max Madhere, and he is an anesthesiologist. I'll actually let Dr. Madhere tell you a little bit about himself.
Hey, hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Max Madhere. I am a cardiac anesthesiologist. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I was raised in Washington, D.C., and I'm a product of public school education my entire life. While in high school, how did I end up going into medicine? Well, basically, I was a volunteer. To graduate from high school, I had to volunteer at needed 200 hours to basically graduate. And at the time, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I just know I wanted to try to rush and get those 200 hours done as fast as possible. But the biggest blessing for me came the fact that the volunteer site that I chose was across the street from from my high school. And that hospital was Howard University Hospital. And from there, what happened was I saw, Black doctors taking care of Black patients. And it was something for me at the time, which is really invigorating and exciting. And from that point, I just knew I was just going to be a doctor. I just liked the fact that I saw doctors in positions of leadership. And I just thought that was so empowering for me at the time. So that's what led me making that decision. I ended up going to Xavier University of Louisiana, which is the number one placer at the time, was the number one placer for African Americans in the medical school. Mm-hmm. And I just grinded when I got there. And I followed my dream, chased my dream, and here I am today. Long story short, I ended up getting into medical school. I didn't get into medical school on first attempt. I ended up having to take the MCAT, I think a total of 3 times. And first time I took it, I bombed. I should have never took it. And the second time I took it, I did a little bit better, but I think my verbal reasoning score went down. And so I still felt like, even though my score was better, there was some gaps in my knowledge. Taking the test, I just didn't feel confident. And so what I did was I ended up going to a program called MedPrep. And that MedPrep was in Southern Illinois University. I did that for a year. And doing that for a year, just taking my pre-med courses, focusing on nothing but preparing for the medical college admissions test, put me at a competitive advantage, I felt, or gave me the confidence to know that I can do well on the standardized test. And from there, I got accepted into Howard University College of Medicine. And I went there because I felt like, it was like coming full circle for me, just going back home from where it all started, for what was the initial catalyst for me. And I basically thrived there. I did well. And I ended up matching into anesthesiology. And I did my residency at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, Michigan. And there was a reason for doing that. I thought that, I wanted to go to a place that I was going to basically see everything. And at the time, that program had everything. They had liver transplants, heart transplants, everything. And so I went there, I did my residency and fellowship, and here I am today. I'm board certified cardiac anesthesiologist. I practice in Louisiana. This is where my wife is from. So everything just came back full circle for me, really.
That's an amazing story. And it is really like a small world for me, because you hit on a lot of key points. First of all, my family's from DC. I'm a PG County girl. So there's that. Okay. And also, the HBCUs, I'm a Hampton girl, so it kind of felt like it hurt my heart when you said Howard, because for you that don't listen, that you are listening, Hampton University and Howard University have a pretty strong rivalry, but it's all love. Yeah. And I also, my dad's side of the family is from Louisiana, so small world. On the other realm, you brought up something that's also very important. You mentioned that you didn't do as well on the MCAT on the first attempt, but you tried and you reassessed where you could do better. And then you reached out and you figured out a way in order to fill in those knowledge gaps. What do you have to say to someone who may struggle with test taking skills, or who may have not gained admission on their first attempt?
I think that's a great question, but I think a lot of test taking skills, and I'm going to answer this question frankly, because I get this question from a lot of people on all sides of the spectrum, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with, just like anything else in life, a lot of it has to do with strictly preparation, how prepared you are. And I think within this society, particularly in America, worldwide really, but particularly in our society, it's interesting. It's like, for the people who have, it's all about access. So if you're a child, if you grew up in a stable household and your parents are able to afford you the best schools and education is stressed in your home and you go to the best schools, more than likely you're going to do well on tests, on standardized tests. And the thing with that is because test taking, the ability to score well on difficult concepts and difficult subjects, to me, have nothing to do with intelligence, but have everything to do with the level of preparation that you receive. Mm-hmm. So if you're privileged enough to receive that high standard from the time that you're in the pre-K, and it transverses through, first, second, third grade, and it goes through middle school and high school, more than likely, when it's time to take these standardized tests, you're going to perform better for somebody who may have not necessarily come from the best schooling or the best environments. Now, is your life written up to that point? No. So what you have to do is, like you said, you have to be able to assess, and you have to be able to say, hey, you know what? I may have had some deficiencies and some knowledge gaps, and now it's time to play catch up. So sometimes it just takes people a little bit longer than others because they're trying to fill in gaps that the people that you're competing against on these tests have received at a much earlier age. So the question becomes, is like, for me, is like, yes, I had to be honest on where my deficiencies were, and then I had to apply myself. So for somebody who may have had the privilege of going to the top private school or the top public high school in a top school district, they may have gotten those building blocks at a much earlier age. So when it's time to actually sit down and take the test, all that stuff is review for them. And they may have to do maybe 30 minutes. Where somebody like me, it was like, I'm going to immerse myself and try to focus and address my deficiencies and get the help where I need. So it's going to take me a year. But whether or not it takes you a year, 2 years, 3 years, you have your whole life ahead of you. And when you keep that in perspective, and you work hard and you really want something, it's out there for you to go get it.
I think that's a very poignant point. Like you have to apply yourself. And if you want something hard enough, you'll figure out a way. I can share my own personal stories. I wasn't as great with test taking skills either. And when I got into medical school, it was kind of a shell shock. You know how they say that they just give you a fire hydrant of information and you have to absorb it. And I didn't do quite well on some tests. And then I took a look back at myself and I was like, hey, maybe the way I'm studying isn't working. Let me see what else is out there. Let me ask the other students. Let me reassess and figure out something. And it's good that you can look at a problem and figure out a solution. And then if that doesn't work, tweak it and try again. Because like you said, your whole life is ahead of you. So don't let one exam define who you are.
Exactly. And then the other thing, is just like, and I tell my mentees all the time, like, it's just like, especially nowadays, I feel like nowadays it's really, really different in regards to access to the information. Like, I feel like when I was coming up, like you felt like you actually had to sit down and had to try to read the entire book to try to figure out what's going on. But the benefit of, I feel like one of the aspects of the benefit of technology is just the information is intertwined and people are intertwined. So it's easier to me, in my opinion, looking back on it, to reach out to somebody, even if it's online and saying, hey, I could just throw on social media right now. Oh, is anybody taking organic chemistry, or is anybody taking
Absolutely
chemistry? What sources are y'all using? What works for you? It's opened up our worlds in that perspective to where, you can, now is the time more than ever. It's like, you have to have some humility and you have to be able to go out there and just go get it and just go do it. That part is, to me, is way easier than it was, let's say 15, 20 years ago.
Absolutely. Like, the world is a totally different world, especially now in 2020 with COVID and everything out there and all of the virtual learning. So schools are even picking up on the ways that you can utilize information and technology. I know when I was in med school, I personally didn't get much out of the lecture. So I learned a lot of things off of YouTube and of course with the syllabus and things.
Yes,
but now you have this podcast, or you can listen to our other ones on the Med School Coach that are talking about MCAT basics and the medical mnemonist with Sam and Chase, or other podcasts. They have books like Slack where you can talk with your other coworkers and colleagues and classmates. So there are so many opportunities to learn, and if it doesn't come through in one modality, you can try another.
Right. Yeah, absolutely agree.
Mm-hmm. What drove you to choose the field of anesthesia as your specialty?
Yeah, this is a great question, because when I get this question, I always tell people when I initially thought I was going to become a doctor, I thought I was going to be a neurologist. I had done some research, some neuroscience research, and it's kind of like, you only like what you're exposed to. So at the time I was just like, well, I was interested in neuroscience and I thought I was going to be this big neuroscientist. And it wasn't until my third year of medical school when we actually started doing the clinical rotations. And I was able to really shadow a neurologist, and no disrespect to neurology. I think it's a great field, but it just wasn't, I didn't think it was going to be a good fit for me from the perspective of I'm not a person who necessarily, my mind wanders in a clinic setting. And it's just being honest, so I'm a type of person who likes to do a lot of things with my hands. So at the time, I was like, man, it was my third year of medical school. And I was like, man, what am I going to do? I don't want to be a neurologist. I don't want to be an internist. Like, what am I going to do? And I was like, well, I'll just switch, because I knew I wanted to work with my hands at that point. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just do surgery. And then I did my surgical rotation. I was like, nah, this ain't for me. But it was during my surgical rotation that I had when I was in one of the operating rooms, just kind of, you're in med school, you just kind of stand there and don't do anything. Mm-hmm. And I found myself, looking over the drape and trying to figure out what the doctor on the other side of the drape was doing. That was an anesthesiologist. He's actually still at Howard to this day. His name is Dr. David, and he basically took me under his wing. He kind of showed me what we do behind the drape. I like the fact that in the operating room, he was applying so much physiology and pharmacology, and it just stuck with me easier because I felt like that's what, we were doing in medical school at the time. And just so happened that those courses were my favorite courses. So he was like, yeah, this is what I do every day. And then just applying the physiology, the pharmacology, and then you mix that with the procedures that we did do. I like the fact that, you didn't have to necessarily to perform a procedure. You don't necessarily have to induce a patient and put them to sleep. They basically were just performing a general anesthetic. There are a trillion ways to give a safe and proper anesthetic without necessarily putting a patient to sleep. And I just thought that was so cool. So I always looked at anesthesiologists as like, we're like the magicians of the operating room or the hospital, really, because we have so many skill sets. Even when a patient is dying, I always tell people, man, give me an 18 gauge IV and the armamentarium for the airway, and I can save anybody's life. That's just the way I feel.
Cool.
So that's what drew me to anesthesia. It's just the continuous application of the anatomy, the physiology, and the pharmacology, which is really what you learn in medical school. Really, that you have to be able to apply in acute situations that I like about the most.
That's awesome. And then you pursued a fellowship in cardiac anesthesia. What drove you to do that?
That is correct. So the thing is, what I ended up finding out was that I like to deal with really, really sick patients. Like I get a level of satisfaction out of that. That's a little bit different from, anesthesia. It has different subspecialties. And I just found myself, I didn't want to do chronic pain because, again, that was clinic. I like kids, but don't necessarily like managing neonates. I do it when I have to, but I don't, the emotional toll of dealing with neonates was a lot for me. And with cardiac anesthesia, the difference is that you're dealing with really the sickest patients in the hospital. And it's a great feeling, when you're contributing to improving the outcome for a patient who is really sick. You see them when they're at their lowest, and the management of the drugs and the drips that you use to keep the patient alive while the surgeon operates on their heart. Or if you're dealing with a thoracic surgeon, while a surgeon is basically taking out the entire segment of a lung or one entire lung, and you're able to use your physiological principles to keep them alive, there's a level of satisfaction. And then on top of that, with cardiac anesthesiology, you always have to stay on your toes because, you deal with so many complex issues. It's not just cardiac issues. A lot of times you're dealing with a lot of hematologic issues. Basically, the entire spectrum of medicine is in the operating room, and it's in that specific time that the patient is in the operating room where you're applying all aspects of medicine for that patient. So that's what drew me to cardiac anesthesia.
That's awesome. What advice would you give to a medical student who is interested in anesthesia and they want to learn how to apply themselves well to match in that field?
What I would just say is it doesn't matter what the field is. Number one, it's just like I was saying before. It's all about if you wanna match in anesthesiology, then you definitely want to just apply yourself. Again, unfortunately, this is the game that we play, but your test scores, your board scores do play a role. You don't necessarily have to be score the highest number for your board scores. And it's not over if you don't necessarily perform well or if you fail your boards once. It may take a little bit longer. So, but if that is the case, then you definitely want to have as much exposure to the field before you apply, meaning that you definitely want to try to get as many shadowing experiences as possible. You definitely want to get into the operating room and kind of know some of the language. It's not an end all be all. But, the language can be a little bit different. But, so if you get in the operating room, familiarize yourself with some of the terminology and some of the language, particularly with a lot of like the drugs and the drips and the airway. But if you can stand out like that, that gives you a tremendous leg up. And of course, with the shadowing experiences, of course, you're definitely, when you get on the rotation, you definitely want to be able to stand out. And it's not like you have to kiss up to anyone, be a professional, let your personality shine, definitely be early. Don't be on time, be early. And the earlier you're there, the more prepared you'll be. And if you're at a program where there are residents and you're showing up before the residents and you're doing what you can do to help make that resident's day go by faster, then the residents notice that too. And they'll even put in a good word for you with the attendings, which is how you get noticed. If you're somebody
Absolutely.
who kind of just shows up and then, if you're there, you show up a little bit late, then a lot of medical students do that, so you definitely want to be able to be punctual, be early, don't be on time, be early, and then leave the latest. And that'll definitely give you a step ahead.
I think that's some really good advice. Like on any rotation, you come, you're prepared. Even though medicine has a specific language, each specialty has their own little quirks and their own little terms. So one acronym or mnemonic somewhere can mean something completely different somewhere else. So know the difference, as well as a good point was to be early is very important. To be early is to be on time, and to be on time is to be late is unacceptable. So definitely work on that, and I think that everyone will thrive.
Yep.
At Med School Coach, we know that getting into medical school is hard. In fact, 60% of pre-meds who apply to medical school don't even get accepted. And if you want to get accepted into a top medical school, it's even harder. It's a complicated process, and even students with great grades and MCAT scores get left out. That's why more students than ever are turning to Med School Coach for admissions advising. Our advisors are all physicians and former admissions committee members, so they know exactly what medical schools are looking for. One-on-one admissions advising from Med School Coach makes all the difference. Our expert team will help you develop a game plan, prepare your application, edit your essays, and coach you for interviews. Every pre-med has a story, and we'll help you tell it so you can stand out from the crowd. Visit us online at medschoolcoach.com and use offer code PODCAST10 to save 10% up to $400 on a Med School Coach admissions advising package. You can achieve your medical school dreams, and Med School Coach can help.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the Pulse of Perseverance?
Oh, yeah. So definitely. So Pulse of Perseverance is my organization that myself and my two best friends started. It's an organization that's dedicated to empowering and inspiring young Black youth by giving them a blueprint and resources for success. And our blueprint is essentially a book that we came out with. The book came out in the beginning of 2018. And the book just kind of chronicles and journeys, gives an insight into the young Black male experience when trying to overcome obstacles. So, everybody has their own journey, but our journeys are so distinct from one another. But it shows like a period of time where we were in 3 different cities, but we were all going through these challenges that are very similar to the Black male experience. So we chronicled that in the book, and it was a very authentic book. So it did relatively well, and it got some national media attention from it. So the book has sold well since then. And we use the proceeds from that book to do 2 things, which is, like I said, give the resources. One of the resources is we give a monthly scholarship every month to a deserving student. They have to be in high school or college, but they just have to be able to show that they're dedicated to changing the narrative, their respective communities where they come from, and shifting the culture within Black America. The other resource that we're very excited about is basically we're going to be forming an app, and the app is going to serve 2 purposes. One, the initial purpose is going to basically try to create a national mentoring platform where kids, particularly our kids who we know that come from these disadvantaged environments, can have a space where they can be able to reach out to people such as yourself or such as me, where instead of necessarily going through the typical no social media channel like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, there'll be a centralized location where they can do that. And so it's going to be outside of medicine. We're trying to save as many lives as we possibly can because we know all the challenges that exist. And we're just trying to operate outside of the status quo because we feel like traditional public school system is a bit antiquated in certain respects. And the kids, whenever, when you're a mentor and you're passionate about this stuff, when you go out, and we've gone out and we talked to so many kids across the country, and the narrative is still the same in terms of how they view success and what people they determine who are successful. And most of the people that the kids determine who are successful are still athletes or entertainers. And so we're trying to open up their mind frames and show people like ourselves who are tangible that they can reach out to. So if they have a question, they don't necessarily need to have access to that doctor or that lawyer or that entrepreneur or that CEO. If that person is not in their family, they don't have a chance. Now they can have a chance because they can directly interact with these people, and the people who are dedicated to the platform can mentor as many people as they possibly wish to.
I think that is phenomenal. It's quite ironic that this past weekend I participated in a hackathon, pre-conference, where it was involving MIT and different thought leaders from the medical field and a lot of other engineering fields, education and things. And a lot of topics that came up was talking about our discussion point was how to defeat racism in healthcare and how can we leverage technology to do that. And we were doing a lot of brainstorming, and I don't know if the listeners out there know, but Black physicians only compose about 5% of the medical physician workforce. And that number, for Black women, has gone up from about 2% to 4% since 1978. And Black males has actually gone down since then. So we're out there and we're trying to encourage people to mentor so that they can see what is better. But we can't do it alone because, like we said, there are only 5% of us out there. So 95% of people also can work to help improve the workforce, improve mentoring, and bring everyone together to just do better than what we're doing in 2020, to be honest.
Yeah. And that's the thing, it's it's true. And it's that statistic, I'm very familiar with it. And then so it's just like the definition of insanity. If you just keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results. So it's just we want to try to find innovative ways to, expose our youth. Exposure is everything. Mentorship is everything. And we know that, when a kid, specifically a kid from a disadvantaged background, has mentors in their lives who are successful, their odds for success increase drastically. So, the very few of us that are out there, there's so few of us and we're out there and, but our level of activity differs based on, what's going on within our personal lives at the time. So we really just want to say, I dedicate a significant portion of my life to mentorship because it's something that's important to me, but I can't necessarily judge somebody else if they're not as passionate about mentorship as I am. But I think everybody knows that, particularly with everything that's going on today in the societal realm, how do we make this a better society, a more equitable society for our kids. And so everybody knows they can do a little bit more. And if you get everybody doing a little bit more, then the chances for, changing societal outcomes changes drastically.
I totally agree. And I totally agree with your statement as to everyone may not be as passionate as you or I about mentorship and getting out there in the community. But since this is a medical podcast, we can all be mentors, just like we're all leaders in healthcare.
Right.
So if there's a student that's on your rotation that's struggling with you, or in the clinical world or something, reach out to them if you're doing well at that. If you're at a senior resident or upper level student, and you see someone who is new on the rotation and might be slipping, like they're late or they're not prepared, maybe pull them to the side and not be pushy, but say, hey, like, this is how I've been doing okay. Like, maybe you can do this. So we each can give back to one another, and it may not be on a grand scale, but you too can influence the future of medicine.
Absolutely. Like, it's true, you don't want to just like leave the door open. You want to kick the hinges off. So in order to knock the hinges off, just like the door was left open for us, we need to, that door, that crack hasn't budged the past 40 years.
Absolutely.
So we just have to get into these spaces where, we have to sit at these tables and make these decisions, and then make sure that, we're providing pipelines where our kids are actually prepared when they enter into these spaces, because that's a whole different conversation, and nobody likes to talk about that. It's kind of like, again, why haven't things changed? Well, the majority of kids who are coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, particularly if they're minority, you're telling them that they have to compete with these kids who, are coming from the top schools, and then they have them turn around and say, okay, well, what's wrong with these kids? See, this is what the issue is. No, the issue is in the whole, it's systemic and structural racism. That's the issue. Like, and this, I don't want to take too much time with this, but, because I'm so passionate about this stuff, sometimes it just, comes out. But it's kind of like, you talk about like structural systemic racism. Well, what does that mean? Well, what that means is that, the people living on, y'all don't care where, any city, you could point in any city and you could say, okay, why isn't the curriculum the same for all the children within the school system? Like, why is the school system poor? Why, like, who are the teachers that are training these kids? Why aren't they qualified? Like, all of it ties into one. Like, we're so interwoven in society that, what we've done is you've created a society of haves and have-nots. And then so if you want to be quite frank and quite honest about it, it isn't a surprise like, oh, like a Max and Madhere or my partners like Pierre Johnson or Joseph Simeon. Like, if you look at what we had to go through, we had to go through the needle of the eye of the haystack. And then we had to, work so much harder than everybody else to be where we are. And not saying that, that's a testament to us as men, but at the same time, when you get into these spaces, you see how other people didn't have to do that, so it's kind of like there's this level of separation there. And again, it doesn't come down to intellect. It all comes down to preparation. And I don't care, I always tell the kids this, and this is not my opinion. This is fact. Right? I don't care what it is that you do, right? If you dedicate 10,000 hours to it, you'll be pretty proficient at it. I don't care what it is. So, if you have kids and you dangle Beyonce or Jay-Z or the hottest rapper out, and that's all you dangle out in front of them, and you say, well, this is success. Well, the majority of the time, that's what they're going to try to do. They're only going to emulate what they see. So, if that same child, if he tries to emulate that athlete or that entertainer and they dedicate that many hours, they're going to be pretty good at it, right? But if the same child, if they put 10,000 hours into whatever the field of their choice is, they're going to be highly proficient and good at that too. You get most of our boys, if you put them in the spaces where they dedicate 10,000 hours to higher level education, then they're going to be scholars, But, you have to be able to have the village committed to that as well. And the problem is with, the village surrounding our kids, it's just not as strong as it needs to be to make sure, they stay on the right course and the right path and realize how do you play this game and how do you succeed.
I completely agree with everything you said. And I appreciate that you were so open and honest about what's actually going on in our society. There are, like, our numbers are abysmal for Black doctors in medicine, and there is no excuse for them to be this low. Like I mentioned, for Black men in particular, the numbers have gone down. Like, how do you go from being at the very bottom to being beneath that? That's ridiculous.
You want to talk about that? Can we talk about that?
We can talk about it. We can talk. We got time. So we can talk about it.
Okay. So, all right. So I love that. I love that discussion too, because I will tell you how. I will tell you this. Since 1977 or 78, right? When they pulled those statistics, what's happening is that, everybody thinks we live in a colorblind society, right? So that comes out, affirmative action comes out, and in the 70s, they federally try to force and apply that principle, like, okay, we have to try to make diversity better, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the opposition says, well, why are people of color? Why should they have any advantages? Mm-hmm. And it's basically like, it's like this. It's like you having the whole pizza, right? Let's say the spectrum is an entire slice when it comes to medical education. Mm-hmm. And if Black people make up on that whole slice, we make up basically, let's say if it's a pepperoni pizza, the amount of people who are admitted who are Black are like a size of one pepperoni on that entire pie. Mm-hmm. But then you have all of the people, you have everybody arguing points about why does this small pepperoni on this entire pie, why are they even getting admitted? They're not qualified. Mm-hmm. You see, so it's a game. It's a colorblind society. Say, oh, no, we've moved on beyond that. And it's just gotten worse and worse. And I love President Obama, but the Obama presidency, what it did was it tried to make it seem like, on the grand scheme of things, America has moved beyond race and there's really no excuse. Now we have a Black president. But in reality, that wasn't consistent with what's been going on with education and the disparities in education from before that time, right? So people think it's like really this long time ago. Let's just talk about it. Like people think like Brown versus Board of Education. It's such some far time that, they'll say, oh, slavery was a long time ago. Oh, Brown versus Board of Education was a long time ago. No, that was less than 100 years ago, mm-hmm. right? And we're talking about, you have grandparents, people who are still alive, that were born, that were school children during that time. And, and then, we apply something and, the government applies affirmative action. And then they said, okay, that was 40 years ago. That was the 70s. Like, what are you guys complaining about? Well, what are we complaining about is that structurally the system is still rigged. It's still rigged in a favor to where it only benefits the haves and leaves the have-nots out. So what we're stuck with an antiquated system. So we're saying, hey, go through the eye of this needle stack. And if you're strong enough, resilient enough, and have enough mental fortitude to overcome all of the rejection, and you somehow are able to do well enough to pass our test, then we'll consider you letting you in. Mm. Right? So everybody we're not playing on the same field. So if this is the football game, and you start at the 50-yard line, and I'm starting at the 0 or 1 yard line, and you're saying go score a touchdown, that's not equity, right? But America likes to put it in this thing like, oh, we have equality, so let's roll back all these things. And that's how you get situations where, you have people who are sitting on admissions committees across the medical school spectrum and saying that we're not, applying what's going on. We're just going to look at test scores. We're not going to look at backgrounds. We're going to look at test scores, strictly test scores, and that's it. And whoever has these certain test scores, we don't care about what you came from. We don't care what your circumstance is. Hey, this is America. You get it how you look. So the thing is like nothing has changed from the 1970s until now. And the education is worse because it basically made it seem like we're in a colorblind society, like our kids come from disadvantaged backgrounds and getting the same preparation and they're not. And there's been nothing to address that. That's when we talk about structural racism, that's what that means. So again, if nothing changes and the school system stay antiquated, you're going to continue to get the same results.
I believe that is absolutely true. And I appreciate that some people are out here working to see how we can change the future. Like, I know that I think the step 1 test went to pass fail, but I don't know if that's necessarily enough. So it'll be interesting to see how admissions councils go and committees and things like that. And even moving forward from what the schedule looks like in our recording of this series, I believe that this interview should be coming out on election week if things go well. So it will be very interesting to see where we are at this moment when you guys are listening to this after November 3rd and how we can move forward as a healthcare field.
That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. We may have to have you back to see, like, after the election, what our game plan is, talking about racism in healthcare and our game plan.
At Med School Coach, we know that studying for the MCAT exam can be challenging, especially for busy students on the go. That's why our team created MCAT Prep, the only all-encompassing study app built specifically for the MCAT. MCAT Prep by Med School Coach provides student access to extremely high-quality content and a personalized curriculum for free. The app has more than 250 videos, 1,000 flashcards, and 1,000 unique MCAT questions. Plus, MCAT Prep by Med School Coach allows students to create a personalized study schedule and track progress over time. You need every competitive advantage you can get to get into medical school, and now you can put the experts from Med School Coach into your pocket. It's the closest pre-med students can come to a personal tutor without spending a penny. Download MCAT Prep by Med School Coach for free at medschoolcoach.com/MCAT. Or download it directly from the Apple Store or Google Play Store. You can achieve your medical school dreams, and MCAT Prep by Med School Coach can help.
That's an entirely different conversation because it's so deep, And I'm just one of those people who feels like, again, when you're talking about, when you step into the political realm, how important local politics and how the majority of people don't understand how local politics work and affect all these different states, how all these local politics in different states affects the national platform. And so presidency is important, but when you realize like who's really pushing the keys behind every time progress is made, how the people who are in these true important positions, how they can just roll things back, take them away, put up things like gerrymandering, shrink school districts, use political dollars to basically figure out how how's the opposition going to have an advantage. We could talk about that another time.
Absolutely. I've really enjoyed talking to you today, and I think that you brought up some really valid points. What is one thing that you would like to leave for pre-medical students and medical students in terms of like a pearl of wisdom as they go through this journey of beginning their medical career?
To me, that's relative. I think just in the grand scheme of things, medicine is a field where you're not going to be right 100% of the time. Medicine is a field that it will humble you, even when you think you have it down pat, right? So the thing about medicine is that you have to be a lifelong learner. So in order to be able to learn, you have to be able to be receptive to the continuous acquisition of knowledge. You have to be very forthcoming with your shortcomings, and you work on improving those things. And it's like the smartest person in the room knows that they know nothing at all. And the second that you think you have medicine figured out, it's going to find a way to humble you very quickly. So as long as you keep that in mind, that should be, one of your major driving forces and motivation. Your job, if you're a student or you're trying to get in med school, is trying to continuously find ways to be able to acquire information efficiently, be humble enough to know when you need to get help, and just know that, you're going to, it's just like real life, you're going to take some bumps and you're going to get knocked down. But the important part is to just keep going. Like you have to keep going, because the second you stop is when especially if this is something that you want to do, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're doing your potential future patients a disservice, and you're potentially doing your community a disservice, because regardless of whatever anybody feels, we're needed. We're very much needed in regards to changing morbidity and mortality in people's lives. And the things that medicine teaches you, it's just so more important. Like I realize, like I'm a physician by practice, but I've kind of stepped into my role of being a community leader. And I don't know if going in the medicine route, if I didn't go the medicine route, would I have stepped into this space of where I am now for myself? So that's what I'll just say. Stay the course, be humble. It's okay when you take lumps. You won't be the first person. You definitely won't be the last, and do good, be the best person you can be and do good, and know that this world it needs you, and it's greater than you. And it's just, you're playing a role in order to make it better for the people coming behind you.
Thank you so much for those words. And with that, I don't think I could have ended it any better. So I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll see you next week. And Dr. Madhere, if you want to just say bye too.
Okay, see y'all later. And I just want to throw this in there again. If anybody's listening to this and you're in college, and we know the challenges that go down with education, and we know the cost of education is a big hindrance, particularly from those of us who come from, disadvantaged backgrounds. We don't have all the answers, but we do offer a $1,000 scholarship every month, not once a year, not every 6 months, every single month. And we've already impacted over 30 kids from high school and college. So you can do the math on that. And we're definitely out there to play our role in order to show the importance of giving back, because the world doesn't see enough of us. We give back with our words, but we also give back via our actions. So if you're interested, you can just go to our Instagram at Pulse of P3. That's PULSEOFP3, or just go straight to our website at pulseofp3.com.
Thank you for that plug. I think it's very important work that you guys are doing with allowing students to get access to financial resources. A lot of students do need that. And as you all know who are looking into medicine is expensive. So thank you guys for doing that work, and we'll say bye.
Okay, thank you.
Each episode of the Prospective Doctor podcast is brought to you by Med School Coach. To access articles, videos, webinars, and free tools to help you succeed on your journey toward med school and beyond, visit our website, prospectivedoctor.com. We hope you tune in again next time.